knowing better isn't the solution anymore. His decisions actually caused him financial ruin. Peer pressure doesn't work through theory. It works through lived, raw, daily experience. Financial education that only reaches the mind will never reach the behavior.
Welcome to the Leaven Academy podcast. We are here to help you build future-ready youths with our experiential learning workshops.
Here is the thing most parents miss about teenage spending. It is not that your teenager doesn't know better. It's that knowing better isn't the solution anymore. There is a clear distinction between operational shift that happens between primary school and secondary school. At primary age, the relationship is very straightforward. You can sit the student down, the child down, explain money rules, and set simple boundaries. They generally respond directly to these limits and boundaries. But at secondary school, you can use the exact same explanations, the exact same logic, and get wildly different, completely surprising results. And it's not structural ignorance driving these really odd spending decisions. It's something else entirely. Have you ever watched that student or teenager make a spending choice that made absolutely no sense, but made complete undeniable sense when you thought about who they were trying to be in front of their friends? Today, I'm going to walk you through 3 hidden forces that make financial maturity much harder during the teenage years, and show you exactly what can be done about each one of them. In my years working with secondary school students across Singapore, I've seen the same pattern appear over and over again. Students who could explain financial concepts with absolute clarity on a worksheet, but still make completely different and surprising decisions that blindside the adults in their lives. We regularly see students in our workshops who can perfectly recite definitions of budgeting, saving, delayed gratification, and they get all the right answers. Yet those exact same individuals make real-time choices completely shaped by their peers and the group that they're in, or how they want to be seen by people around them. This isn't a knowledge problem, it's a formation problem. Financial education that only reaches the mind will never reach the behavior. I very clearly remember one participant during one of the programs that we've run. During the initial discussions, he gave brilliant answers. He communicated the concepts really well. There was great intellectual capability in him. However, when we moved on to the board game that my company has, his actual choices revealed a completely different trajectory, and this is what happened. I watched him take on massive loans, and they were risky because they were not backed by any kind of revenue or assets. When I saw this, I naturally stepped in. I asked him, what's happening here? And he confidently told me that what he was having in his hand, which were the debts, was simply good debts. At the end of the game, in my head, I predicted that he would be in dire situation, and it came true. His decisions actually caused him financial ruin. Now, thankfully, that was a controlled game that we had, and it didn't happen in real life. I'm incredibly glad that he learned that profound lesson because I used this circumstance to help the rest of the group learn about it. And it was during that the lesson itself did stick with him. But that just highlighted to me, knowing the answer, having that knowledge, doesn't mean you possess the maturity to apply them under a real life scenario, which is what the board game did. What are you actually watching for when you look at your own child or your own students' money decisions? Are you merely looking at the decision itself? Or are you trying to investigate what are the thought processes driving it? If a child is anywhere between 13 and 18 years old, this video is exactly for you. And even the students that you take within this age group, this is just for you. I call this psychological engine the identity spending loop. It has 3 distinct layers, and once you learn to see it, you will never look at that teenager spending choices the same way again. Layer 1 is identity pressure, who they think they need to become. Layer 2, belonging signals, what they need to own or participate in to fit in. And layer 3, spending as expression, where money becomes the primary tool used to close that identity gap. Let me walk you through each layer and I'll show you exactly where the behavioral challenge sits. But first, here is the simplest diagnostic test you can run. If you ever ask your teenager why do they want that item, and the real underlying answer is about who they want to appear like, not exactly what they need, you're already witnessing the identity spending loop in motion. Think about Singapore secondary school culture. The intense focus on a particular school bag brand, phone model, trendy water bottle. It isn't about random functionality. These are carefully calibrated social signals, and teenagers feel those signals acute deeply, and even when they don't have the words to articulate it. Here is one simple action you can implement immediately, so take action if you need to. The next time a teenager comes to you with a spending request, pause your judgment, ask that one question, and the one question is, who in your group has this? Don't say it as an accusation. Watch your tone. Don't use it as a threat. Ask it as a genuine conversation, opener to understand the environment, and listen carefully to what their answer reveals. Are you having a meaningful spending conversation with your own teenager or your own student? Are you just functioning as an automated transaction approval engine? That single question opens up a real conversation. Now, let us dive deep into the first structural layer. Identity pressure doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, disguised as personal preference, and it's completely normal at this developmental stage, but it means that student or child's relationship with money is now entangled with their relationship with themselves. Adolescence is the core developmental stage of identity foundation or formation. It is not a collection of character flaws. The big question, who am I, gets answered partly through teenagers choose to carry, choose to own, and choose to be part of. These are actively testing out versions of their own identity. The financial risk occurs when the identity being built requires money they don't have or habits they cannot possibly sustain. Financial maturity here looks like spending money to look like someone else rather than to acquire something useful. In the school settings, I frequently see students interacting in their peer groups. They naturally tend to look quite similar. They carry similar kinds of items. They make purchases together. Yet if you observe closely, you will often notice one or two students within that particular group. They appear to second guess their own purchases. It is obvious when you look at them. They pause, they look hesitant. They show brief moments of internal friction. But despite that internal hesitation, they almost often go with the flow. They complete the transaction because their group identity matters way more to them than their individual circumstances. There is absolutely nothing wrong to fit in. However, as educators and as parents, we must point out this observation. Some parents might say, but Ernest, isn't that just completely normal teenage behavior? It is, but normal does not mean consequence-free. Understanding this dynamic means you can respond thoughtfully with guidance rather than reacting in anger. So here is one practical step for layer 1. Notice whenever spending requests cluster heavily around major transitions, like starting a new CCA, joining a new group of friends, entering a new school. These moments are prime triggers for identity pressure spending. Recognizing this context allows you to have a better, grounded conversation. Do you know which version of themselves your teenager is actively trying to build now? So that is the first layer, identity pressure. Now let's address the second layer, belonging signals. Belonging is one of the most powerful, non-negotiable forces in a teenager's life. And belonging carries a price tag. It is not always a high price tag, but it's always a real one. Peer groups define their boundaries through shared objects, shared activities, shared digital experiences. Having or not having certain things signal to a child whether they are really safely in or just completely out. Students will willingly spend their allowance or ask their parents for extra money solely to close that gap, and it's a social gap. From a teenager's perspective, that is not frivolous or superficial. It feels completely necessary. It isn't materialism, it is belonging. These two are entirely different things. This dynamic became really deeply personal to me recently. My own son came to me wanting to buy a specific merchandise item from a particular cartoon franchise. He didn't invent a practical excuse, he just looked at me and he said explicitly that he wanted it because all his friends had it. And he simply didn't want to experience that FOMO feeling within a circle. Now, some parents respond to this by saying, "We've already told him that true belonging doesn't matter what you own." That is a true principle, and I agree with it. But teenagers don't fully believe it yet because they haven't lived long enough to see it proven. You're trying to work against immediate peer pressure. Peer pressure doesn't work through theory. It works through lived, raw, daily experience. Your practical step for layer 2 is very simple. When a request is clearly social, step back and say, tell me more about this. Create a safe, quiet space for them to articulate why it matters to their world. The conversation itself builds far more long-term maturity than the financial decision that they make at the end. So is your teenager spending money for functional utility, or are they paying a belonging price to a group they haven't taken time to fully understand yet? So the above is the second layer, belonging signals. Let's examine the third layer, spending as an expression. By the time your teenager reaches 15 or 16 years old, money is no longer just a medium of exchange. It has become a language. They are using it to say something specific about who they are, or who they desperately want to be. I've been there. Spending at this stage becomes deeply expressive, not just functional. It communicates expression, deep expression. It communicates identity. It communicates taste. It communicates belonging, and it does communicate maturity, both to their peers and back to themselves. This teenager doesn't think of this very consciously, but the behavioral pattern is always consistent across school environments. That is precisely why concept-only financial theory or literacy education never reached the real-world behavior that I am so deeply trying to bring across to the world. You are not competing against financial ignorance, you are working alongside a vehicle for self-expression. Now, this story is also about me. I look back when I was younger and wanted to hang out with my friends. They would sometimes plan to go out to specific locations, and I knew exactly how much money I had in my pocket. I knew that spending this at this place would cause me to lose the financial decisions I could make later on because I won't have it to make any of those decisions. Yet, almost every single time, I will make the decision to join them because I wanted to belong to that group. It mattered more to me than my individual comfort or discomfort. Similarly, when I look at the kids today and the teenagers today, I see their intense desire to belong because that causes them to put choices, that those choices places them in positions where they spend far more than they would like, but it makes them feel belonged to a group. You might think they will eventually grow out of it, and they probably will with proper guidance by yourself. But if this underlying pattern is never really addressed, the psychological habit of using spending as a tool for self-expression grows up with them. They enter adulthood with a much larger income met with far larger consequences. So, the practical step for layer 3 is to name the mechanism without actually shaming that child. Don't lead with an aggressive budget lecture. That's the fastest way to lose them. Instead, try saying, I noticed this specific item matters to you. Not because of what it does, but how it makes you feel. That's actually worth understanding. So spend time with them, understand them, and then shut your mouth. Listen. Naming the hidden driver without passing judgment is always the first step toward helping them mature. So, what does your teenager's recent purchase tell you about the story they're trying to tell the world and about themselves? So that was the third layer, spending as an expression. Now let me bring all 3 layers together. Here's the core truth. We have established today the reason financial maturity gets significantly harder during the teenage years is not the lack of knowledge. It is that money is completely tangled up with identity, belonging, and self-expression. This identity pressure helps them to become someone. Belonging signals mean spending to stay connected. And spending as an expression means money is being used as a social language. So to help your student who is a teenager or your own child navigate this, we have a 3-step action plan so that you can start utilizing it this week. Step 1, watch for the trigger, not just the transaction. Notice exactly what social context is causing that spending request. Understanding this trigger helps you address the real identity question. Step 2. Ask one clarifying question before every spending decision or conversation with your child or student. Train them to think, is this something I need, something I want, or something I feel I need to have to fit in? Over time, helping them build in this internal filter helps them to understand that they're not trying to get parental approval. They're just trying to use it as a guide to help them to form their own identity. Finally, giving them low-stakes practice with real money and real choices. Let them manage a bounded weekly allocation with genuine, unfettered version of freedom to manage the money. And when teenagers have this, they will be able to build the financial judgment without feeling that someone is going to control them or judge them. And they would also need to feel the consequences of their own decisions so as to learn from it. Supervised financial freedom is how maturity actually develops, but they need that freedom. So if this analysis was useful, the next question worth asking is, what does financially mature behavior look like in a teenager? Because once you understand the hidden forces driving the spending, you need to know exactly what positive standard you're building toward. To see what this blueprint clearly is, you might want to watch and take note of our next video that will be coming out in the next week, if you're watching it on this day that is being broadcasted. Otherwise, you can watch it right up there. Remember, the ultimate goal is not to stop a teenager from spending. The goal is to help them develop the independent judgment to spend wisely, even when the identity, belonging, and the image are all standing in the room. To learn how Leaven Academy partners with schools and families across Singapore to build real-world youth readiness, you might want to visit our website, link you can find in the description below, or you want to email, and you can also find it right below. And if this video has been really helpful to you, a like to help us to spread the word out would be really, really helpful. And you might want to hit the subscribe button so that you can get more of these kind of videos to help you out when it comes out. I will catch you in the next video. Take care.